The neighbor who drove a semi through my barn. I've been farming this land my entire adult life. It's not a hobby, it's a livelihood, and it's a legacy. We are talking about a few cows, some chickens, a handful of goats, and one very opinionated donkey that has become something of a local celebrity with the neighborhood kids. For a few months each year, I open part of the property as a small petting zoo, entirely legal, fully permitted, and something I put real effort into. Watching families reconnect with where their food actually comes from never gets old. Then, about 2 years ago, a new neighbor moved in next door. I'll call him City Boy, because that's precisely what he was. A man who made his money in an urban environment, decided rural life sounded peaceful, and apparently did zero research before signing on the dotted line. He seemed to believe that the country meant silence, still air, and no inconveniences. What he got instead was the natural soundtrack of a working farm. Our very first conversation set the tone. He told me the animals were disruptive and rude, his word, rude, and asked how long I planned to keep them. I actually laughed, assuming he was joking. He was not. I explained, as calmly as I could, that I was legally zoned agricultural farmland, operating well within state guidelines, and that chickens do not actually check anyone's sleep schedule before crowing. He was not satisfied with this answer. What followed were months of escalating harassment. Notes in the mailbox complaining about the rooster. Calls to animal control. They showed up, saw healthy, well-cared-for animals, and left. A complaint to the sheriff's office alleging cockfighting, completely fabricated, which was investigated and dismissed the same afternoon. The man even stood at my property line filming my chickens like he was producing a documentary. I'll be honest, I'm human, and eventually I started responding with sarcasm. When he complained about the donkey being too loud, I told him I'd pass along the feedback about indoor voices. Not my finest diplomatic moment, but there it is. The real breaking point came on an otherwise ordinary Saturday. I was inside making lunch when I heard what I can only describe as a sound unlike anything I've experienced before, a grinding, splintering crash that shook the whole house. I ran outside to find a full-size semi-truck buried halfway through my barn. The front end was sitting directly where the goats are typically kept. My first thought was that something had gone terribly wrong, a mechanical failure, a medical emergency, something accidental. Then City Boy climbed out of the driver's seat. He had rented the truck. He had, at some point, gone through the process of obtaining a CDL license, and he had made the deliberate decision to drive it through my building, apparently believing this would resolve the noise issue to his satisfaction. Fortunately, and I cannot stress this enough, not a single animal was harmed. Most were out in the pasture. The others had the good sense to move to the far side of the barn. Animals are smarter than people give them credit for. The barn itself was another matter. The structure was a total loss. Beams snapped, walls splintered, the entire front half collapsed. We are talking 6 figures in reconstruction costs, and that's before accounting for the weeks of disruption while the animals were temporarily rehomed with neighboring farms, because that's what a farming community does when one of its own is in trouble. Police arrived quickly. The evidence wasn't exactly subtle. Truck tracks running straight from his property to my barn, and his own admission that he'd done it intentionally. He was arrested on the spot, reckless endangerment, criminal mischief, and trespassing. His insurance company, upon learning the destruction was deliberate, declined to cover a single dollar. That meant every cent of the rebuild came out of his pocket. His defense in court, that he had somehow lost control and that I bore some responsibility, did not impress the judge. The police report told a very different story. He was ordered to pay full restitution. The complete cost of the rebuild plus additional damages for emotional distress and the sustained harassment. The zoning board also stepped in and discovered illegal unpermitted construction on his property, which added fines on top of everything else. The new barn, when it was finally finished, was better than the one he destroyed. More modern, better laid out, sturdier. He paid for every board and beam of it. He eventually had to sell his property, couldn't carry it financially after the lawsuit and fines. The couple who bought it. Wonderful neighbors. They're genuinely delighted to have fresh eggs and milk next door. The rooster still crows before sunrise. The donkey still answers him like he thinks he's entitled to. And every morning when I hear it, I smile, because that sound cost my former neighbor everything he thought he was protecting himself from. Story 2. You wake the house, you own the morning. I'm a 28-year-old woman who works from home, and I own the house I live in. My boyfriend and our roommate both work the same job with a 6 a.m. start time. My boyfriend's alarm goes off at 5:30. He's up and out the door by 5:40, 10 minutes during which I get up, pack his lunch, make coffee, and send him off properly. It's a routine that works. The roommate is a different story. His alarm, and I want to be precise here, is not a gentle nudge. It is a full volume, 5-minute interval notification system that begins at 5 a.m. and continues until he finally surfaces at 5:30. On weekends, sometimes it runs until 6 o'clock on its own. The man is, by his own description, a light sleeper. He has actually complained that hearing the television from my closed bedroom at night keeps him awake. The irony of this has not been lost on me. By 5 a.m., the alarm has woken the dogs, woken me, and on the mornings my boyfriend's 3-year-old daughter is staying with us, woken her too. If you have ever been in the presence of a toddler who has been pulled from sleep 2 hours before her body was ready for it, you understand why this is a significant quality of life issue. I asked him, more than once, to simply turn the volume down. Not to change his schedule, just to be less of a disruption to everyone else in the house. He refused each time. So I made a simple adjustment. I started getting up at 5 o'clock. I am awake anyway. I own the house. And my morning routine, letting 2 large dogs out of their crates, doing dishes, running the washing machine, turning on the television for the toddler when she's with us, is not a quiet routine. I've never pretended it was. I simply stopped doing it at 8 o'clock and started doing it at 5 o'clock. He started giving me looks. Then came the occasional, exasperated, "Why are you awake?" To which I have one consistent answer: because you woke me up. He has since argued that I'm being petty for no reason. My offer stands, turn the alarm down, and my mornings go back to starting at a civilized hour. He has declined. So we all rise at 5 a.m. together, as a household. My boyfriend, bless him, sleeps through all of it. Story 3. The estate agent who tried to play me, and lost the commission. This story is about 22 years old, but I still think about it with a certain quiet satisfaction. I was buying an old farmhouse and a good stretch of land that had been sitting on the market for 2 years. The property needed significant work. Anyone with eyes could see that, but I knew what I was getting into and I was prepared for it. Negotiations went smoothly. We were 48 hours from exchanging contracts when the estate agent called with an interesting development. A new buyer had apparently emerged, offering £30,000 above my bid. However, and here's the part where I was supposed to feel lucky, the sellers preferred me. If I could simply come in $5,000 above that new offer, the agent was confident the house would be mine. I want to be clear, my parents raised me to pay attention. And what I was paying attention to was a fairly transparent attempt to inflate the agent's commission by manufacturing a bidding war that may or may not have involved a real competing buyer. The sellers, incidentally, had been trying to move this property for 2 years without success. The timing of this mysterious new offer was, shall we say, convenient. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I simply told the agent to advise the sellers to proceed with the other buyer, and that I was withdrawing my offer immediately. I absorbed the cost of the surveys and the solicitor's work I'd already done, and I walked away. About 3 months later, I ran into the sellers in town. They expressed sympathy about the illness that had forced me to withdraw from the sale, which was, of course, the story the agent had apparently constructed to explain my sudden departure. I could have nodded politely and moved on. Instead, I told them what had actually happened, that their agent had attempted to squeeze an additional £35,000 out of me, and that as a result of his actions, their property was still sitting on the market. We had a long conversation. It turned out they were tired of waiting. I already had all the paperwork and surveys ready, and we were both motivated to resolve this quickly. We pulled the property from the market and completed the sale privately, through solicitors, without involving the agent at all. The sellers got a fair price. I got my house. The agent, who had tried to manufacture pressure to pad his own earnings, got nothing. Not a penny. Was it petty? Perhaps slightly. Was it worth it? Without question. Story 4. I went nuclear on my HOA, and I'd do it again. 6 months ago, my wife and I bought what we genuinely believed was our dream home. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard I'd been planning a garden for since before we even started looking. The HOA fees were reasonable. The community looked well maintained. Our realtor assured us everything would transfer cleanly at closing. 2 weeks after we moved in, a letter arrived informing us we owed $475 in HOA fees plus a $200 late penalty. We had paid every fee at closing. I had the documentation. I called the HOA office and explained this. The woman on the phone told me they had no record of the payment and that I needed to pay the full amount, plus late fees, within 30 days, or they would place a lien on our property. I emailed proof of payment from escrow that afternoon. No response. A week later, a second letter arrived with a higher figure and a tighter deadline. When I called again, I was told to file a formal complaint and wait for the next monthly board meeting. The escrow company, to their credit, was immediately helpful. Their representative confirmed that the payment had been sent and received. It simply hadn't been processed. She contacted the HOA directly and sent documentation with tracking confirmation. 2 days later, another lien threat arrived anyway, this time for $975. That was the moment I called our real estate attorney. My attorney, I'll call him Mike, reviewed the documents and was direct. This was either gross incompetence or deliberate harassment. He started digging, and what he found was sobering. This HOA had a documented pattern of losing paperwork specifically for new homeowners, then levying excessive late fees. They had been sued twice in the previous year. Most residents had simply paid rather than fight. Mike's letter got the HOA president's attention. She called me personally, offered to waive the late fees if I'd pay the original amount again, as though the problem were a clerical misunderstanding and not a demonstrated pattern. I declined. She informed me they'd proceed with the lien. I told her we'd be requesting the full financial records as permitted by state law. That's when her tone shifted considerably. The records request covered 3 years of financials, board meeting minutes, every complaint filed, every lien executed, and all fee documentation. The response from the HOA's lawyer suggested they were not eager to comply, but they were legally required to. While we waited, I talked to my neighbors. 15 of them, as it turned out, had experienced nearly identical situations. Mysterious lost paperwork, duplicate charges, lien threats, and the calculation that it was easier to pay than to fight. When the records finally arrived, Mike called me in to review them. The picture they painted was not ambiguous. New homeowners had been systematically double-charged. Excessive late fees had been collected at a rate exceeding $50,000 in a single year. And the funds, the extra payments that shouldn't have existed at all, had been deposited not into the HOA's main operating account, but into a separate account. An account with signing authority held by the HOA president and one office employee. Not the board treasurer. Not any other board member. Just them. We filed complaints with the State Attorney General's office and the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Then we called an emergency HOA meeting. The community center was standing room only. Mike laid out the findings methodically. The board members present appeared genuinely shocked. Most of them had no idea this was happening. When the president tried to adjourn the meeting, the board voted to continue. Neighbor after neighbor stood up to describe their own experiences. By the end of the evening, the president and the office employee had been removed from their positions and a forensic audit had been ordered. The audit confirmed what the record suggested. Approximately $200,000 had been misappropriated over 3 years. Both women were arrested 2 weeks later. The president received a 5-year sentence. The office employee, 3 years plus probation. Both were ordered to pay restitution. Every homeowner who had been double-charged received their money back, with interest. The HOA has been fully restructured. New board, new management company, new policies requiring multiple signatures on all financial accounts. And I'm on the board now, heading up the oversight committee. My wife finds this hilarious. I went from fighting the HOA to running part of it. Some neighbors have suggested I went too far, that I could have gotten our money back and let the rest of it go. Maybe. But what I found wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated scheme targeting people who were new, vulnerable, and unlikely to push back. I'm not able to look the other way when I know that. If you run a criminal operation and it catches up with you, the consequences aren't someone else's fault. They're yours. Story 5. She taught me that rule, so I applied it to her. Years ago, I worked on a team with a woman I'll call Rosie. Rosie was one of those colleagues who had been around long enough to know the procedures cold, but had carefully arranged her career to avoid any actual responsibility. What she had instead of responsibility was a hobby, catching other people's mistakes. Every error that crossed her desk, typos, a spreadsheet that didn't include fields she thought should be there even when no data existed for them, anything she could frame as a deviation from how things should be done, generated the same response. An email to the person who made the mistake, with the supervisor copied. No matter how minor, no matter how irrelevant. CC the boss, every time. Management tolerated it. I moved on to a different team and largely forgot about Rosie. Then, years later, her name came up again. Her team had a light workload, so she was assigned to assist mine with data entry, names, dates, dollar figures, that kind of detail work where accuracy matters. My general approach to errors is practical. People are human, mistakes happen, fix it and move on. That has always been my philosophy. Unless the error belongs to Rosie. In that case, I compose a careful email to Rosie. I attach a screenshot of the error. I explain, clearly and specifically, what went wrong and why. I let her know I'll correct it, and that I simply wanted to bring it to her attention. And I copy her supervisor. She is not pleased about this. That much is apparent. She has complained that I'm being petty. She may be right. But the policy wasn't mine, it was hers. She established it years ago and applied it consistently to everyone around her. I'm simply honoring her methodology. It turns out the rule she taught us works in all directions.